as we gather round. How many voices make a chorus? How many choices lie before us? The work we come to do is so important. So if we asked you, would you join us? Menorah. Hamakom Hazen. How amazing is this place? We can fill this holy space with holy sound as we gather round. There's magic in the way we come together, with voices raised and eyes turned towards forever. The weight of our future is enormous. So we are asking you to join us. Menorah. Hamakom Hazen. How amazing is this place? We can fill this holy space with holy sound as we gather around.
In this week's Torah portion, as Jacob awakes from his dream of that ladder that rises to heaven, he says, Menorah hamakom hazeh, how amazing is this place. Places are amazing not because they are imbued with some power, but because we make them amazing. And we are going to make this prayer space amazing. This prayer space that exists not only in this room, but also in the virtual congregation all over the city, that we build together, that we fill with that sense of Norah, that sense of wonder, that sense of awe, that sense of community. So we are pleased to be with you here in the room, to be with you online as we build that community together. We want to remind you, if you're here in the room, and even if you're online, that now is a great time to turn off your devices so that you can be present in this room. Anything that rings, jingles, or buzzes as we work to build that Norah, that sense of wonder together. And so we are going to continue this morning. One of the things that is going to make this evening so beautiful is getting to celebrate with the Blitz and Ziff families as Sophie and Julia become Benot Mitzvah on this Shabbat. And so as their family is coming in and getting settled, we are going to invite Sophie and Julia and their parents up to lead us in the lighting of the candles, which can be found beginning on page 3. Come right up to that mic. Get as close as possible.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us.
As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives.
Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Okay. Now you Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Mazel tov. Shabbat shalom. You guys can have a seat. I'll call you up in a minute. Join me with these words that you will find on the screen in just a moment. These words, Lechu neranena, come, let us sing. Let us sing out to God, the maker of all, sure and strong. Let all of creation from mountain to sea hear our song. Lechoner Adonai, lai, 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 lai. Adonai, lai, 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 lai. Nahariya. Try this part with me. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Letzur yishenu. Yai, lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. For all of the wonder in all of God's light, we rejoice. So now let us listen with all of our hearts to hear God's voice. Lechoner Adonai, yai, lai, 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 lai. Adonai, yai, lai, 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 lai. Nahariya, yai, lai, 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 lai. Letzur yishenu, yai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. We can
Our prayers this evening are in the blue books in the seats in front of you. If you want to follow along, we are going to continue with Lechado D, which is found on pages 20 and 21. We'll sing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, because those are my favorites. And when we get to the 9th verse, we're going to rise and we're going to turn and face the entrance, because that is the moment when Shabbat enters like a bride. Page 20.
Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'diburecha בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני הסגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרבה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרבה.
We remain standing as we turn to page 28 for Baruch Hu.
But before we do, let's just take a moment to maybe greet someone nearby and wish them Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam va'ed, Le'olam, Le'olam, Le'olam va'ed. Yadadai, yai, lai, lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Yadadai, yai, lai, lai, lai. Yai, lai, lai, yai, lai, lai, lai.
As world leaders met this week to discuss the pressing issue of climate change, I was struck by this tension that we live in, which is that we appreciate a world of abundance, and yet we do not want to take advantage of that abundance. And striving to live in that balance of appreciating the abundant nature of the world but not treating it like there's scarcity, like that we could use it all up, but also knowing that we could use it all up, is the challenge that we live in, is the challenge of our age, and trying to draw some blessing from the earth and a sense of that abundance is, I think, the spiritual challenge of our next prayer, which is called Ma'ariv Aravim. And so I wanted to share with you a poem this evening that is about trying to find some abundance from the earth. It's called Earth Verse by Gary Snyder. And it reads, you can read it with me because it's on the screen, wide enough to keep you looking, open enough to keep you moving, dry enough to keep you honest, prickly enough to make you tough, green enough to go on living, old enough to give you dreams. Baruch atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim.
Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. We will know that you Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
You may be seated as Julia makes her way up to lead us in the Vea Hafta, which is found on page 36.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושינתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלבבך בדרך ושבתך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
As we prepare for Michamocha, our prayer for freedom, we are going to sing the words on page 39.
Standing on the parted shores of history, still believe what we were taught. Forever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it's eternal Egypt. There's a better place, a promised land, and the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. That there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together, singing Yai-da-dai, Yai-dai-dai-dai, Yai-da-dai, Yai-da-dai, let's try it together now. Yai-da-dai, Yai-dai-dai-dai, Yai-da-dai, Yai-dai, Yai-da-dai, Yai-da-dai, page 40. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai.
We continue with a blessing for Shabbat Yismechu in the middle of page 44.
This is my first Shabbat where we aren't wearing masks and people are singing, and I can see that they're singing. And I just have to say, it is so magical. There's a little clapping in this one.
ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. To clap, clap, or that. קוריונק וקוריונק, ישמחו במלכותך. I liked it. שומרי שבת. מקדשי, מקדשי שבי, כולם ישמחו ויתענגו מטובך, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. וקוריונק וקוריונק, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה בראשית. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה בראשית. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. וקוריונק וקוריונק, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת.
We continue with the Amidah, which begins on page 46, and we invite up Sophie to lead us. Please rise, page 46. Yes.
Adonai sefativ tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasavim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, Vezocher Hasei Avovim Mahot, V'Vila Livnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Hozer U'Mashiach U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, V'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah Rav le'oshia. Mashif haruach u'marid hagashem, Mechakel hayim bechesed, Mechayeh hakol berachamim rabim. Somech noflim ve'ofeh cholim, U'matir asurim, U'mekayem Muatov Lishene Yafar Micha Mocha Bal Givurot Umido Melach Melech Memit Umekaye Umatzmiach Yeshua B'nei Emanu Tav Le'achayot HaKol Baruch Atah Adonai Mechaye HaKol Atah Kadosh Shimcha Kadosh Ukedoshim B'chol Yom Yahalelu HaSelah Baruch Atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh.
Please be seated. In almost every way, the quarantine of pandemic was the worst. But not in every way. There were some small things that were blessings. Blessings so thoroughly wrapped up in hardships that sometimes they were hard to notice. But I think that for many of us, there were small things that we appreciated. Maybe it was slowing down from work or having a shorter commute or learning that we could connect with family using technology who lived on the other side of the country or the other side of the world. There were things that we learned in COVID that maybe we want to keep. And for me, a lot of what I learned was about the slowing down and about the letting go. Things that I am not by my nature good at. And we had this 18-month period, which is not entirely over, of learning that lesson. But we also get a lesson in that every week, and it's called Shabbat. And the gift of Shabbat is a reminder of what I had to be reminded and maybe learned over 18 months, which is about slowing down and letting go. And I found this poem this week that as our meditation on Shabbat I want to share with you. It is called On Working Remotely and No Longer Commuting with Chronic Pain by Kamisha L. Jones. And it goes like this. The train leaves the station without me. So does the bus. The sidewalks stay empty of my steps, the rushed ones, the ones pierced with pain, the it's too late at night to still be walking ones. I keep my cash. It doesn't load my Metro card and then another card when the first one's lost. I don't panic in the car about leaving late, at least not as much. When winter comes, I don't sit on the cold, cold bench waiting and waiting, clutching my pair of stock hand warmers. I don't bundle myself up in oppressive layers or unravel in the late night, releasing the day's pressures like a punctured balloon. Instead, I sit and continue to sit in this chair and then that one, look out the window to escape the screen's demands, wonder how I ever had fuel for those past travels. I rest and I rise and I listen to the body that's carried me here as it whispers the way forward. The poet wrote of writing this poem, while I was writing it, I was thinking about my pre-pandemic commute to work. 3 hours total, 1.5 hours each way. I was astounded at all I pushed through for years. My time off was mostly spent recuperating from work. The pandemic immediately transitioned me and my colleagues to working remotely full-time. It opened conversations between us about disability justice and how to unravel unrealistic work expectations. We began dreaming of new ways forward. May we not return to normal and its toxic expectations of productivity and hustle. May we all listen to the body for sustainable ways forward. May Shabbat be an opportunity to listen to our bodies for sustainable ways forward. We continue with Shalom Rav, page 60.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael We take a moment now to pray silently.
Adonai, Adonai, Tzuri, Tzuri, Adonai, Tzuri v'goali. Adonai, Adonai, Tzuri, Tzuri, Adonai, Tzuri v'goali. Go inside your heart, just be. Go inside your heart and see what it wants, what it needs, what it yearns when you breathe. Go inside your heart and see. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be kind,
Be kind,
be true.
be true.
May they be acceptable to you. Oh, my rock, my rock, my rock, my rock, and my redeemer.
We turn our prayerful attention now to a moment of healing. For those in our lives who are in need of a refuah shlema, a return to wholeness. We think not just of the people who are sick in the conventional ways, but we think about people who struggle with chronic pain, chronic illness. We think about those we know who struggle with addiction and those who are in recovery. We think about those who are ill and those who take care of them, doctors and nurses and loved ones alike. We offer this prayer for healing. In our community, we are thinking of Sarah Astrich, Bradley Borden, Melba Berman, Tao Costas, Richard Dana, Melinda Ellinger, Joe Fetterman, Edward Feldman, Bart Fraley, Georgianne Goldenberg, Marcine S. Goldman, Emily Goodfriend, Deborah Goodwin, Richard Jackson, Sarah James, Adam Kaplan, Barry Kaufman, Brad Kovnak, Lawrence Levy, Elton Lipnick, David Livitz, Christine Marcus, Neil Reisman, Keith Silverblatt, Edward Simmons, Robert Braitman Smith, Linda Colby Stein, Marcia Tushita, Michael Ward, Roger Williams, Yvonne Zients, Ariella Sharon Bat Yafa Shoshana, Daniel Zev Ben Zaharia HaKohen V'Miriam, Gelka Nechama Bat Leba Chaya, Leah Bat Shmuel V'Pesel, Leah Fruma, Yisrael Ben Levi, and all who are suffering with physical illness, emotional distress and pain, and those battling COVID-19. We're also holding in our hearts all the families impacted by the tragedy at the Astroworld concert this past week. We offer this prayer for healing that's found on your screen. A few brief announcements for this Shabbat. Starting tomorrow, our Shabbat morning classes will start 15 minutes earlier and meet from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Zoom. This change will enable Shabbat morning learners to participate in online classes and then arrive at Temple for in-person worship services at 10:30. The Sisterhood New Traditions Gift Shop will host its second annual outdoor Hanukkah market Sunday, November 14th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the West Driveway. Come shop to support Sisterhood, visit with friends in the comfort of the outdoors as you prepare for Hanukkah, which starts on Sunday, November 28th. Next week, we will have 2 worship opportunities. We'll have our congregational service at 6 p.m. We will also have Warehouse Shabbat here at 8 p.m. It is sponsored by our Young Professionals group, but it is also for anyone who feels like they want an alternative worship experience. So you are welcome to check that out. 6 p.m. services will be live streamed. The 8 p.m. Warehouse Shabbat will not. And lastly, we are excited to bring back challah and wine or grape juice as part of our Shabbat worship experience starting this weekend. We are grateful to Diane Pouchette for being our designated challah slicer. And we are appreciative to the Blitz and Ziff family for sponsoring tonight's challah and wine as a way of honoring their daughter's simcha. I want to talk about prayer. Of course, I always want to talk about prayer. But in order to do so, first we have to talk about science fiction, space travel, and physics. In science fiction, when an author wants to write about spaceships traveling between the stars and arriving in any reasonable amount of time, they have to come up with a way for them to travel faster than light. But this is impossible, knowing what we know about physics and Einstein's special relativity, so science fiction authors must invent means of faster-than-light travel that stretch the laws of physics, hopefully not beyond the breaking point of credulity. Douglas Adams, in his humorous Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, sidestepped this problem. His ships were propelled by an improbability drive that drew power from the sheer preposterousness of the whole endeavor. But most authors have to wrestle with this in a way that is, for lack of a better word, more down to earth. In Star Trek, one of my favorite science fiction properties, the ships travel using a warp drive. This works by warping the fabric of space-time to bring two seemingly faraway places closer together. If you imagine 2 dots on a piece of paper, instead of drawing a line between them, you bend the paper to bring one dot right next to the other. Warp drives have appeared in science fiction since the 1950s, but entered the mainstream with Star Trek. But I would like to argue tonight that the concept of warping space to travel easily between two places was not invented by the great science fiction writers of the 20th century, nor by astrophysicists, but by the rabbis writing the Talmud in the 5th century of the Common Era. The rabbis have fanciful imaginations that should be a source of envy to any writer of speculative fiction. When they encounter a problem in the text of the Torah, or even just a wayward detail that creates some interpretive ambiguity, the rabbis invent brave new worlds to address seemingly mundane issues. Take, for instance, one vowel in this week's Torah portion that prompts the rabbis to invent a scientifically plausible means of faster-than-light travel. Parshat Vayetze opens with these words: Jacob left Beersheba, and he went to Haran. He came upon the place, and he stopped there for the night because the sun had set. This is the preamble to the story of Jacob's dream of a ladder to heaven. But even in this simple description, the rabbis raised at least 3 questions. The first thing they notice is that it says ba makom, the place, and not be makom, a place. So it seems that this is a particular place, maybe of some significance, but it's not named. Second, they notice that the sequence of the clauses is weird. He seems to go to Haran and then come back to a different place. You would think that it would be in the other order. He was traveling, he came upon a place, and then he went on his way to Haran, where he ends up. And finally, the Torah uses a strange word for encounter, vayifga. When the rabbis encounter ambiguous words, they like to go look for other places where that word appears. The rabbis connect vayifga to another place where it's used in the book of Jeremiah, where it means not to discover, but to pray. So the rabbis posit that not only had Jacob come upon a particular place, but that he prayed there. But now the plot has only thickened. Where and why did Jacob pray? Well, we can also look for that word bamakom, the place, in other verses from the Torah. That word appeared 2 generations before, where it says that Abraham arrived at the place where he would sacrifice Isaac, Mount Moriah. The rabbis like this connection because Moriah would later become the location for the temple in Jerusalem. So, of course, he would want to pray there. So now we know that Jacob not only arrived at Mount Moriah, but also that he prayed in the same place that Abraham had once prayed. But what about the issue with the sequence? Why does it say that he went to Haran and then, I guess, backtracked to Moriah? And here is where the rabbis write their science fiction story. Jacob knew that it was a special mitzvah to pray in the same place that his father or grandfather had prayed. But only after Jacob reached his destination in Haran did it occur to him that he might have passed such a place on his journey and missed that opportunity. So he resolves that he is going to have to turn around and go back. The moment he decided to return, a miracle happened. And the earth collapsed a little bit so that Mount Moriah was right next to where he was standing. He needed only to turn around, step over the now small chasm to the spot where Abraham had sacrificed the ram, not Isaac, and immediately he began to pray. All of this, I promise you, in the Talmud. And thus, the rabbis have invented history's first warp drive, powered in this case by the intention to pray. Now, the rabbis are having fun here. They are solving problems that they themselves created, and in doing so, making fantastical stories about moving mountains. But any reader of science fiction knows that the best stories are not just fun or imaginative, they are about something. So what, we might wonder, is this story about? This is the question that bothered the Sfat Emet, the 19th century Hasidic master. He wonders, what is the connection between the earth collapsing for Isaac and the prayer that he offered? The Sfat Emet concluded that the story comes to teach us that through the force of will, a person is able to awaken the holiness of God in any place. For him, the key element in this story is Jacob's will, his desire to pray in the place of his ancestors. You might have thought, as Jacob did, that the place was what was really important, that there's some sort of special mojo from praying in that same spot. But not so, says the Sfat Emet. What matters most is that you intend to pray with your whole heart. After that, the impact of where you pray is negligible. Prayer is hard, and I can identify with what the Sfat Emet is saying here. We ascribe to our forebears a certain spiritual authenticity that we feel we could never live up to. We might think back to our ancestors and assume that they must have connected to Judaism on some deep level that will always be inaccessible to us. Or maybe we did not even have Jewish ancestors or religious ancestors, and we look at these words and feel a great chasm between ourselves and some idealized prayer experience. We feel like Jacob in Haran, so far away from this imagined world of religious legitimacy. We might feel strongly about the spaces where our forebears prayed, or about the melodies they sung, or the language they used. Some of that comes from a sense of familiarity and comfort that is vital to prayer. But maybe some of that also comes from a sense of spiritual imposter syndrome. How they prayed was right and holy, and how we pray feels less so. Perhaps you remember the movie Keeping the Faith from 2000, where Ben Stiller and Ed Norton played a young rabbi and priest who were best friends. In one scene in the movie, the rabbi is trying to inspire his much stuffier than this congregation to sing. And so he invites the local gospel choir to lead them in a rousing rendition of Ein Keloheinu. It was meant to show that Stiller is not your parents' Judaism kind of rabbi. Shortly after the movie came out, I was at a Jewish educators conference. There were some people going around telling everyone they should boycott the movie. How dare they present such a holy song in such a frivolous manner? People were incensed. But I remember one rabbi I respected finding the whole debate ridiculous. He said, "You know the melody of Ein Keloheinu is adapted from a German drinking song, right? Sometimes the melodies and traditions we think come from Abraham and Jacob are actually much newer." This is not an argument against nostalgia in prayer. There is a great power in hearing familiar melodies and refrains. They transport us and they connect us to previous generations. But what the Sfat Emet is saying is that they do these things only when we turn to them with the intention to connect. The transformative power is not in the place or the melody, but rather in our desire to connect with them. When Jacob wanted to commune with the prayers of his ancestors, he finds himself right where he needs to be. The expanse of prayer can be great. The words on the page may seem so foreign to us, and not just because they are in Hebrew. But the Sfat Emet teaches that the essential mode of prayer is yearning. It's striving to reach beyond ourselves. We reach backward towards the generations that have come before us, all the way back to Jacob, to Abraham. We reach inward to find our true selves and to listen to the voice of conscience within us. And we reach out towards the infinite, towards a vastness beyond our comprehension that perhaps we call God. And the surprising and wonderful discovery of prayer is that sometimes, when we need it most, just that act of reaching out moves the mountain. We find that the distance we thought was great has collapsed, that the infinite was closer to us than we could have imagined. The first step of connecting to prayer is wanting to connect to prayer, and the steps after that are easier than we imagine. There is a moment in the Yom Kippur liturgy near the end of the final service of Ne'ilah. After all the repenting that we have done, we come to a new prayer. It's called Atat Noten Yad. God reaches out God's hand. After a day of fasting and praying, after all the hard work, we turn the page and there is God reaching out God's hand. You might have been worried, am I doing it right? Do these prayers even mean anything to me? Do I even believe any of this? But there God was all along on page 654, reaching out God's hand. The distance that we thought was unbridgeable between us and our ancestors, between us and ourselves, between us and God, perhaps it was not so great after all. If you approach the act of prayer with honest intention, God is always there, reaching out a hand. Many works of science fiction posit worlds at the edges of our imagination, worlds very distant from our own. But the best works of science fiction describe those worlds in a way that seems familiar, like we could get there if we tried. Prayer, at its core, does the same thing. It posits a world as it could be, It uses images of creation and revelation and redemption. It speaks to the infinite, the unknowable, the transcendent. And sitting here in our pews, these ideas could seem as far away from our lives as starships in a distant galaxy. But the power of prayer is that it is like a warp drive. It bends those distances until what was far away is very close. The world as it could be seems plausible. These ideas that seem so foreign are suddenly familiar and relatable. God, who is infinite, is now also reaching out a hand, close enough for us to take it. The Sfat Emet ends his commentary on our verse by talking about the fact that Jacob's earth-warping prayer takes place in the darkness, after the sun has set. He says, "From this we learn that for every person with authentic reaching, there is no place where one is unable to feel the inner light." Prayer is not an act of performing words like the script of a play. Prayer is not an act of repeating a script that belonged only to those who came before. Prayer is an act of yearning, of reaching, of aspiring and imagining. And when we turn to that task with true intention, we find it may be possible to boldly travel beyond what we ever thought possible. Shabbat Shalom. We continue now with Aleinu L'Shabach, which is found in the middle of page 282. Please rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 287. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו ושמו אחד.
Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth. Our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, life and death. We take a moment now for silent memory. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. Tonight, our heart goes out in sympathy to the family of Annette Sherman Schwartz, who was laid to rest in recent days. We also recall the art sites, the anniversaries of the deaths of Maury Abramson, Josephine Alessandro, B. Mike Atlas, Robert Axelroth, Blanche Berend, Meyer Berman, Herman Black, Stanford Kahn Blum Jr., Lindsay Ann Brazier, Max Brockstein, Sasha Brownie-Atowski, Joseph Brownie-Atowski, and Sally Brownie-Atowski. Martin H. Byron, Sandra Joseph Kaplan, Pearl Friedman Cohn, Hattie Cohn Abrams, Louis S. Colby, Irving Corbin, George Du Bois, William Feldman, Flora Fine, Milton Friedman, Edwin Freitas, Evelyn Friedman, John J. Gates, Philip Lauren Gerson, Neil Goldenberg, Sadie Ida Goldgar, Willie Mae Goldstein, Aaron Goodman, Leon Green, Claude Gruen, Rose Handler, Jacob Aaron Harris, Nathan Harward, Irving Hefter, Orville L. Henderson, David Hooks, Harry A. Horn, Celia Rachel Horowitz, Harlan Arthur Hurwitz, Beverly Jacobs, Max Jacobson, Sadie Kahn, Fred Kesselman, Nan Levy Kleiman, Gershel Kosogliad, Molly Cotlin, Sam Lack, Sarah S. Lack, Nathan Lambert, Harold Hal Lapidus, Solly Liebman, Max Lemmel, Eleanor Waldman Lenski, Henry Lesky, Gertrude Mosias Levine, Sadie Levine, Harry Lewis, Eddie Lieberman, Nanette C. Lipper, David Littman, Sandy Martin, Ruth May, Harry Mellon, Joe Merson, Margaret Meyer, David Milner, Abraham Moskowitz, Lillian Nelkin, Anna Nimzinski, Jerome Frank Niesensen, William Peskin, Elsie Phillips, Raymond Plotkin, Selma Rauch, Raymond Reiser, Sarah Ribnick, Abe Rabinowitz, David Rosenberg, Marcella Rosenblum, Louis Rosenzweig, Bessie Moss Rothstein, Frida Spear Rubenstein, Marlene Rubenstein, Israel Rudy, Myron Sandler, Mary Ethel Schechter, Stephen Schechter, Ruth Schwade, Felice Marks Schwartz, Richard Siebel, Sam Shabbat, Gail Shapiro, Max Scheinberg, Doris Cohen Shemtob, Rose Scher, Melvin Silverman, Cecilia Silverman, Marvin Simon, Louis Slusky, Jarrell Spear, Dorothy Sosno Strauss, Dorothy Strellis, Murray Taylor, Stan Tenenbaum, Jonathan Allen Terrell, Bertha Teiser, Jerry Van, Etta Weinstein, Charles Winokur, Paul Joseph Zimmerman, and Sam J. Zimmerman. We turn to page 294 and rise for the words of Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yirtei v'yamich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'galav v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam omei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dikudsha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'ne'emata, damiram be'ama v'imru amen. Yeshlam Rabbah min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Please be seated as we invite up Sophie and Julia and their siblings to lead us in Kiddush and Motzi. Come up to the microphone.
Baruch Atanai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch Atanai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kikshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu V'Shabbat kodsho, ve'ahava uvratzon chihilanu, zikaro lema'aseh reshit, ki hulom techila, lemikraye kodesh, zecher yitziat Mitzrayim, ki vanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodecha, ve'ahava uvratzon, inchaltanu, baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh hashabbat.
L'chaim. Now you can have a sip. Motzi.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, motzi lehem min haaretz. Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you. Thank you. You can take your individually wrapped challahs back to your seats. Our concluding song this evening is also the song we began with, the words from this week's Torah portion, Ma Nora Hamakom Hazeh. How awe-inspiring is this community that we build together, this place that we have found.
As we gather round.
Please rise for the benediction. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, our God and God of the generations that have come before us. We know that the distance feels great. We know that the work feels hard, that the time feels long. We also know that we have within us the power to turn and to return, to reach out to you, to find some Sabbath rest that might offer us some clarity, some creativity, some calm. And we hope that when we reach out, when we turn with true faith and intention, that we find that you are there, reaching out to us, calling us back to our truest selves. We thank you for the many gifts in our lives, and we say together, Amen.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.